Hello and welcome to the Arsenal Vision post-match podcast with me, your host Tim Stillman, today stepping in for Elliot once again because he is leaving on a jet plane. In fact, I think he's pretty much left and very nearly in the UK by now. Obviously, Elliot is coming over because we have our live show on Saturday evening at Alexandra Palace Theatre. With James and Andrew from Arsblog as well, which we're all very, very excited about. And obviously for the final game of the season, Arsenal v Everton at Emirates Stadium, which, Arsenal finishing the season, finishing their home campaign anyway, home to Everton, happened a couple of times before. We've lifted a Premier League trophy after home games against Everton twice before, for those of you that are into omens, and obviously we really want to do that again on Sunday, but we'll talk about Sunday, obviously both as a game and as an occasion, and we might just go over some things, without wishing to foreground the post-mortem of the season just yet, because it's not over, just maybe a few things that we've learned along the way this season, as well as I think we kind of have to start with Tuesday night's game between Manchester City and Spurs as well. And here to do that with me is Clive, who you can follow on Twitter at ClivePAFC. Hello, Clive.
Hello, Tim. How are you?
Yeah, sorry, that was like I was coming towards the end of my breath, and so it kind of just like I just had to get it out.
We had our health chat before the pod, and let's be honest, our health will not be better in 3 or 4 days' time. So let's just deal with it.
No, I don't think the combination of Saturday and Sunday is going to boost my vitamin D levels.
Exactly.
Not least because I'm not sure how much sunshine there is in the forecast. However, hopefully that'll all be irrelevant anyway. Clive, I know you and Elliot did like a Patreon podcast about this, but I don't think we can start anywhere else other than Tuesday night's game between Spurs and Manchester City. And obviously we're at the stage of the season and have been for a little while where it's not just about what you do, particularly when you're the one chasing. It's about what your opponents do. That is very natural. That is literally how title races work, relegation fights work, the chase for fourth works. That's how it all works, people. And obviously we had the quite peculiar situation. First of all, like one of my initial thoughts is that I think the Premier League has to find a way to not do this again, to not have like a game in the midweek before the final game that's spare for a very, very, very long time. I do think that that's been a bit odd and not very ideal, but City have had that game in hand for a while. We've known it's going to be Spurs. It's kind of been looming for everyone. And obviously, the dynamics around it were very peculiar because Tottenham still needed a result if they wanted to finish fourth, but they don't want to help Arsenal. There's been a difference of opinion, shall we say, between their manager and their supporters about that. And about how some of that manifested itself. First of all, did you watch the game on Tuesday night, and how did you experience it?
Yes, I I watched it. I protected my emotions and reminded myself this is Spurs, and so don't expect anything. But automatically, you get sort of roped into it a little bit emotionally, particularly when they start passing the ball around quite well. And I thought Spurs did some sharp one-touch passing, sort of give you encouragement. I always probably told me actually that Man City were quite nervous. And sometimes with scheduling, you get breaks. We had some breaks maybe in the season that we just ignored. Remember, we went to Wolves at the right time, didn't we, really? They weren't in the best of shape. You have that game another time, then you're in a bit of trouble, because that would be a really tough game. So it's tough anyway, but we managed it better. If Man City could pick a time to play Spurs, they'd probably pick this particular date almost exactly. That's their sort of bogey ground, and they approached it in a sort of nervy way anyway. And so, yeah, it was just unfortunate the way it was timed because all of the atmosphere around it on and off the pitch was just so against what Arsenal needed, which was Spurs to do what they normally do, which is take points off City. And of course they were never going to do that. And I watched this game with my football eye really sharp to look to see if people were trying. Were they really running? And maybe I'm just like, convincing myself that there were opportunities for them to move the ball quicker and go far forward with more aggression. And I just didn't feel they really wanted to, because they care about how they're perceived in front of their own supporters, and almost all of them wanted them to not to win the game, to lose the game. So that means it's not a real football match anymore, is it? Where you have two teams really competing against each other, two sets of fans really competing against each other, and that all goes to make up the match day experience and the match day viewing experience wherever you are in the world. And when you see Spurs fans singing just after City score, you know you're not watching a football match anymore. You're watching an event where reputations need to be enhanced or protected. And it's a shame, right? But it is what it is. We haven't taken enough points to stop that situation from happening, and it just feels a little bit unfortunate, Tim, and a little bit unfortunate. And it's it's hard to accept, but maybe there's one more day left. You never know.
Yeah, I have to admit, I felt I mean, of course, I felt quite dejected after this game. I think most Arsenal fans would have, but I did feel that this might be like if it was going to happen, it might be this game, because I didn't think the Spurs players would feel the same way the Spurs fans do. I still don't. I think you're right. The atmosphere, though, kind of creates that, and where you've got a dead atmosphere. That must be quite weird for the players,
Yeah,
and I'm sure they all wanted that Champions League bonus that's probably sitting on all of their contracts and everything like that. And I just felt if it was going to happen, it was much more likely here than at home to West Ham on Sunday. But to your point, it did remind me of our game against United a bit, where City, for all of the kind of experience, and they've been here every year, etc., etc., like they didn't look like a team who was, super confident. We've been here a million times before, which might give us some hope for Sunday. I don't know, but what did you make then afterwards of Postecoglou's kind of view on it? Because I think there are two. Like personally, I think it's kind of all right for fans and coaches slash players to come at things from different angles. Like sometimes that just happens, it
yeah,
just does. But Postecoglou seemed particularly put out about it, and whether it was just because a video emerged of him arguing with a Spurs fan behind the bench, and who was essentially telling him to throw the game, and he obviously got sick of it after a while. And obviously, you can kind of over-index that because I'm sure the majority of Spurs fans in the stadium were just sitting there quietly thinking, "Not sure I would know what I want to happen here. Maybe it wouldn't be the worst thing in the world if we lose." It wasn't like outward mutiny or anything. It was just a bit flat. But if you're Postecoglou and you've had that guy behind you shouting at you all the time, maybe that gives you the impression that it's more than just one annoying idiot. But what did you make of his broadside? And to be fair as well, what I think is interesting here is he said it's inside and outside. Now, outside, we know he's talking about the fans, so he is including the fans in that. But he also said inside, which
yeah,
I found really interesting. I'd be really interesting. I'm sure he'll never spell it out, but who and what he means by that. And I guess if you're him and you wanted to go to your chairman next week anyway and say, half of this lot, I want to drive to the airport. Like
yeah.
Angie's taxi service is in operation. Get me a bus and I'm driving them all to Heathrow. And maybe this gives him a bit more ammunition to do that if he has, feels he's uncovered who was and wasn't on board for this game. So, what did you make of that whole incident?
Yeah, it's a really strange one actually. And I think it's worth a discussion. I think before the game, I spoke to a Celtic friend of mine, someone I work with, and I said, "What would you do if it was a Celtic Rangers similar to what it was Arsenal Tottenham?" And he said, "I'd want Celtic to play the women's team in the game. Do you know what I mean? Or the under 10s." And so no, no. So I thought, you know what, Clive, get off your high horse about the fans feeling a certain way, But Ange obviously knows about rivalries. So he understands it, he gets it, because he's been up there in Scotland, and trust me, that's a real rivalry. And so when he came, but when I've looked at him, I looked at him from the start of the season, it's obvious to me he's trying to change people's mindsets. He's trying to change the culture at the club. He's trying to change the footballing culture. He's trying to free their minds to get to a place where they have a football identity which is significantly different from Conte and Mourinho. And the Spurs fans have bought into that. If the results are very, very similar to Conte, it doesn't matter. The feeling and the journey they've been on is completely different. They feel different. A few errors have appeared recently because guess what? Other teams have looked at how they play, got a bit more data on them, look at their set pieces, their weaknesses, and they're starting to pick them apart. That generally happens, hence why football evolution is so important on the pitch. But he can't evolve till he gets another transfer window, which is coming up, obviously. So I think for me, when you come to a club and you try to change the culture, what you have to do, and you lose someone like Harry Kane, who was a big part of the old culture, what you have to do is create something new and create something new with the players and get them bought into a common purpose and common goals. And to have that
Lloris
challenge,
as well. I think
yes,
I should say, like, Lloris was the club captain and he
yeah,
went as well. So that's their two captains gone.
yeah, and Eric Dyer as well, another big senior player in the dressing room, right? So maybe Hoiberg would have gone if there was a buyer for him. But really, they are the big chiefs of the old culture. So he he wanted to change that, maybe empower a few players that weren't playing so well, give them a new lease of life. Basuma came in, did well. Papsar came in, and he's done really well. And they've got brought Madsen in, which is a signpost for the new culture. And they're playing their good stuff. They came to the Emirates and they were decent, weren't they? They caught us on a good day, and they were well worth their draw. So he's trying to create a team that can go anywhere without any fear. And even when they had 9 men against Chelsea, no fear, we keep playing. Now we all know some of that looked tactically immature, but he's looking beyond that. He's trying to put a footballing culture in place which is going to lead to them winning. Brave footballing play. And you come to the big moment when the whole world is watching their club. And what do? Well, we're not going to win today. We don't really want to win. So I think he's accepted he's going to lose some games, but he's going to lose some games trying to win. So he's trying to. Was it to dare is to do? Well, isn't that their motto? He's trying to get a little bit of that going, and they just stepped away from it. And I think he's disappointed because culturally and process wise and common goal wise, you put these pillars in place, and they're there always, and you can't ignore them. So I can remember, Tim, we were on this podcast and we were discussing when we went to City. And I was screaming, we've got to get a double pivot in, maybe even go to a back three. We're wounded, we're injured. Remember that time when we weren't so good? And I was thinking, we've got to move away from where we are. We're not strong enough to go there and play the way we played. What did Arteta do? Bang, went out there, tried to press off the front foot straight away. We had gaps in our team, players who were injured, players who were missing, and we got popped. And I thought then, why did he do that? And I think sometimes you have to say, look, this is my philosophy, and I'm not veering away from it for anybody or any day, regardless of the situation. And I think Andy's disappointed by that. He's disappointed by the noises he's hearing inside and outside the club. And the inside bit, Tim, that's the bit that we can only speculate on. What was being said in his ear? What were the staff saying? What were the coaches saying around him? What was the execs saying? And it's very hard. We're speculating, right? Two guys speculating, but you have to be aligned in what you're trying to do. You have to be. You can't decide 1 minute to be one version of yourself, but not today. And I think it's really, maybe he's hurt more than we realize, because when he's worked so hard to put that in place, that sort of the way of working in place, you can't switch it off. You can't switch it off. And I think, I don't want to say what's his space on him, but it's made me think, is that the right fit for him, that club? Can they be changed? Can they change the mentality? I'm not so sure today. I'm not so sure.
Yeah, that's really interesting because, like, I remember something he said earlier in the season when Tottenham were top, and people were like, "Oh, are you in the title race?" kind of thing. And he said this thing about, like, I don't want to write us out of it. Like, I don't want to be the guy that kind of, I want the supporters to dream and all of this. He was like, yeah, I'd be in dereliction of duty if I told all our fans we couldn't win the league, kind of thing, which isn't the same as saying he actually thinks that, but like his, quite idealistic point is like, I want the supporters to be able to think that, and I'm not going to
Yeah.
tell them not to. And so it's interesting that now there's a situation where he's turning the guns on them. A bit like Conte. I mean, Conte did it a lot more a lot more severely than
And
perhaps
he made his money on
Postecoglou
the
did.
back of it, didn't he?
Yeah, which that was very much I think that was very much at the forefront of his mind. But I think that is really interesting, and I do think the optics as well, when you're the only team on TV for an evening game, and it's not buried in a Saturday 3 o'clock or on a busy Saturday or a busy sporting Saturday. I think there is something about when everyone's watching your game, because it's the
Yeah.
only game on, that these things really blow up. So definitely something to watch there. Look, didn't get the result we wanted. I'm going to enjoy laughing at Spurs about it anyway. As much as objectively I probably don't judge their fans for thinking the way they did, I'm still going to laugh at them for the fact that it's come to this, because that's what you do as a fan, right? So the kind of that game happens, and perhaps we have that. I can't help but think of the Sun one-on-one and compare it a bit to the Henry one-on-one in 2006 as a
Ah,
real like sliding doors painful moment. But I'll try not to do that. But Sunday, just quickly before we go on to perhaps some of the nicer stuff about Sunday, the occasion, and we'll talk about it like a game. And it's weird, I haven't thought about it as a football game we have to win yet. And maybe this podcast can really help me to start to do that. But how likely do you think? And look, we've put ourselves in a position where we've got the goal difference. So
yeah.
if we win, City have to win. And I think we deserve great credit for that period after Christmas where we took on some bad teams, but we thumped them and we took that goal difference up. And so we've given ourselves that marginal on the final day. In the cold light of day, when you look at this, what sort of chance do you give before we go on to Arsenal and whether we'll win our game and how we'll win it and the occasion and blah, blah, blah? Like, do you hold any hope at this particular moment in time of West Ham and David Moyes springing a surprise?
And funny enough, I've always had more hope in West Ham than I had Spurs. In the running, there were two games I was looking at, which was Forest and West Ham. Spurs. I just, I just know them too well, Tim. I mean, we've grown up. We've grown up. I'm sorry, I know them. My brother supports them. I know them. I know them really well, and I just didn't have any hope really. But West Ham they're a different club. They've got a bit of moral compass about them, and and the David Moyes link as well. And that's always been in the back of my mind. His final game, him and Arteta are very close. He would try. He would make sure his team tries for him on that last day. So, but in the end, it's down to quality, isn't it? And if Man City do their work as we expect them to do, then it's not going to be it's going to be an interesting day. Hence why I've locked off that side of my heart and head that controls my emotions. I've locked that off for the last few weeks because since the ball kept hitting Chris Wood's standing leg when he should be side footing it in, I've decided I can't go for that emotion anymore. I need to lock that off and just focus on the occasion, the day, who you're going to share it with, and making sure the people that you mark it appropriately. The people that I sit with now every week, I know you do this all the time, but I sit with the same group of people every week now. I can't wait to see them and mark the season, end of the season, and see the people that sit near me. And yeah, I'm really looking forward to the day. Obviously, when people are over. So yeah, that's where my head is really, the occasion, rather than looking at Everton per se, but also West Ham, because I think that will take care of itself. The events will just happen, and it could be, as Arteta said in a recent interview, it could be a beautiful day. If it is, mate, I tell you, it'd be a total surprise, and I'm just not sure what state I'm going to be in if it goes our way.
Yeah, I've got to admit, since Tuesday evening, I've stopped because look, I'm sure everyone's done this, and I've done this a lot over the last week, 2 weeks. I've allowed myself to visualize it. Whether it doesn't mean I thought it was going to happen, or I think it's going to happen, but it was like it's close enough that I've allowed myself to visualize that. The moment, the day, everything, the parade, like it's gone through my head multiple times. it's happened less since Tuesday. It's
Right, got
happened
you.
less since Tuesday, and I think emotionally, and this is where your emotions are a really good barometer of what you actually think. Sometimes what you feel and what you think should be separated, but sometimes what you feel shows you how you think. And I've started to think about Sunday a bit more like almost like last season's last day, where I was determined to celebrate the team and thank the team and all of
Yeah,
that. And last days of the season, particularly for Arsenal, it's kind of weird. We've had a lot of last days of the season in the last 15 years that actually haven't had anything on them, for better and for worse, either because we've done what we needed to do, or we haven't done what we needed to do. Like,
yeah,
we haven't had a lot of nervy last days in recent years. So I've kind of come to associate the last day of the season with that kind of carnival atmosphere, with, as you said, the people you sit with and you see all the time, and it's like, oh, I'm not going to see you for another 3 months, and you kind of all go into hibernation and everything, and enjoying the day, and the pubs don't tend to. The pubs are packed after the game always, but they
yeah,
tend to thin out on the final day. They don't thin out, not for a few hours anyway. The sun stays shining, longer
yeah,
daylight hours, all of that kind of coalesces, and you do get this kind of carnival atmosphere on the last day. And obviously, I think the Premier League kind of do this on purpose, where most of the big teams play like mid-table teams on the final day, and so quite often you're playing a team that's like on the beach, as we've done the last few years.
yeah,
So you get a lot of like 4-5 nils, and I have started to think of this game a bit more like that, rather than where there's something really on the line, even though there is. But I've kind of switched, not consciously, but my emotions have guided me into switching to thinking about, okay. And obviously, we have the live event the Saturday night every year, and so it's become like a weekend. For me, the women's season ends the day before as well. That gets its own day, so I'm going to be
yeah,
doing like that, straight to the live show, kind of straight to the game on Sunday, straight to the festivities after that. Like, it's a real blockbuster weekend now. And I've started to think a bit more like that, and started to think of it again in terms of gratitude, for the team and everything like that. And what are your emotions telling you about Sunday? And I guess, how much are you looking forward to it? Because I think we should also try and put ourselves where we were when the final whistle went at Old Trafford. And I think all of us felt it was significant to take
yeah,
this to the final day. Whether we won it or not, it felt like a significant, worthwhile milestone to be able to do that. And I've loved reading the tweets about the trophy is going to have to be in the stadium, and Richard Masters is going to be at the Emirates, and and like, we're not wearing next season's home kit, and all of that kind of pomp and ceremony that might not happen, but the fact that it's there,
yeah.
it feels like it means something to me.
It's there in the background. So whatever happens, we as fans, as supporters, we have to plan for it happening, right? So we have to plan. The club has to plan for it happening. They have to have strategies in place, and the league has to plan for it happening. So it makes this a real event. And to be honest, most of home games are massive events anyway. But this is a real event, and we spoke earlier about the world watching Tottenham on Tuesday. Well, the world will be looking at our ground. They will be looking at our game and looking at the City game in conjunction, right? Because it's got the biggest jeopardy around it. So I think that alone is really great for the club to have the eyes of the world watching it, and and we've been positioned now. So Tim, we've done this podcast what 4 or 5 years now, and we spent the vast majority of that looking at Liverpool and City like they were some sort of faraway dream. Right, so we watched those games, watching Mane and Salah slashing through the City defence, and Sterling and Sane, etc. We watched these teams thinking, well, we're never going to be anywhere near that for a long time. But here we are. Here we are. And this isn't the end. This is the end of the beginning, maybe. So this is just starting, and if you make good decisions continuously, in an aligned, collaborative way with the right people in the room, it's amazing what you can do, right? So, and that's the overriding feeling that I have. I'm just so excited to watch this team develop. And the decisions we made last summer with our buys, we can sit here now and say they were so good, and the one that didn't play, he's getting rave reviews, and he kicked the ball for one half of the game, and so I'm so excited to see how we step forward. Really, that's where my head is. What does the horizon look like? How do we incorporate our lessons learned into sales and into purchases to get us moving forward? And that's where my mind is at the moment.
Yeah, and we'll talk about that a bit later. But let's actually talk about the game on Sunday, which feels a bit weird. I feel like if Man City hadn't won on Tuesday night, we'd be talking about that a lot.
Yeah,
Like,
yeah,
because
good
the
point.
anxiety over, oh my god, this is game. We use that phrase all the time, don't we? Game for your life. This would be game for your life if we were going in with the lead
Yeah.
on the final day, and that would make the pressure so different and all of that. But we've, I don't want to say stumbled on, we've fallen on, we've come across a team um, at the moment that started, I think, the last 4 games. And I think that's relatively common at the business end of the season. You kind of, particularly once you're out the cups, you're in a 1 game a week kind of loop, and if you can keep things going as they are, you do. There's the need to rotate, and physically isn't there because it's like one more game, and etc. 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 I mean, I think the only position, unless there's injuries, I can't see that Martinelli is going to start ahead of Trossard. I think the only one that people might question is whether Jorginho comes in for Thomas Partey. Maybe
Yeah.
there's been a kind of a perception, and I felt it as well, that it's perhaps become a bit more transitional off the ball, that the risk reward dial has been moved, and that has good points and bad points. Against Manchester United, it kind of felt bad, but at the same time, that's a very different game, I think, Old Trafford, and you could see in our performance that it was a different type of game with a different pressure, whereas sun shining at the Emirates playing against Everton. Would you make any changes to the team, and specifically, I guess the Partey Jorginho question? Do you think it will be the same team?
I think we go back to Manchester United game, and I did have the stomach to rewatch that blockbuster again this week, and it was strange. There were so many component parts that weren't quite right, but maybe not quite right by what we expected. You know, we've been really engaging people in midfield, in particular, really aggressive, really swamping teams. But we scored after 15 minutes, and we sort of didn't need to, right? So, and Thomas Partey's position, for example, he was between the centre backs a lot in first phase build up, a lot. And I look at these things and I think to myself, well, he's not doing that because he's just gone freestyle. He's doing that because that's what we want to do. And it was really interesting that maybe Arsenal had looked at Man United's left hand side and thought that's where they're going to attack the most from. So we need to make sure that Sleeper can get out there and double up. And he had his best game of the season where he was the top of all the stats. So it's an interesting one. Sometimes, I've said this before many times in the pod, we have expectations when we walk into a room that we're going to see certain things. I really like what how the midfielders looked in the previous games, but I didn't like it in this game. Was it down to individual performance? Because I didn't think any of the three of them were that great. Or was it down to a system that we played? So moving into Everton on Sunday, I honestly, I don't care too much, Tim, about these things. Once it's there, I look at it. If Jorginho plays, that's absolutely fine. That means we've seen something. We want to do something different on that day. We've seen it together. We've seen it. We've watched the Liverpool home game, for example, when Jorginho played and smashed it. Right. So we've seen it. We've seen other games, maybe in particularly in the Bayern leg, where I thought it was a bit too much from against Lima and Goretzka. I didn't think he dominated in those games. In particular, Musiala picking on him a little bit, made those changes, but he looked really fresh when he came on at Old Trafford the other weekend. So if he goes back the other way, no problem. They're two elder statesmen. There's no drama for me if they flip flop around. Do you see what I mean? No drama at all. I just think The most important thing as we develop this team going forward is accept when people are out of form, like Martinelli, for example, maybe not quite in form. Accept it. Someone else is in form. He plays until he drops out of form or until Martinelli trains like a demon and gets back in again. And these are the structures that we can now recognise that are in place in the team, in the club, and they're a big part of the selection. So if someone plays, normally it's because they've deserved to play, and I'm comfortable with that.
Yeah, we referred to when we were looking at kind of diagnosing what had gone wrong at the end of last season. I know you and Elliot kind of used the phrase a lot, like you come in after that March international break. It's like playoff, right? It's
Yep.
like a different season,
Yep.
and this stuff happens. And I've used examples before, like when United beat us to the title in 2002-03, they fell on something where Solskjaer was playing on the right wing,
Yep.
and that was never the long-term plan. I don't think he ever played there again for United, but for the last 7-8 games, it worked. So they just kept doing it. Once
Yep.
the summer came and you come into the new season and you've got a marathon ahead of you and everything's broken up and you've got to rotate and you've got 4 competitions, it's different. But when you get into this bit, it's very different, and it'd be interesting to like have a bit of insight into what Arteta's conversations with some of the players who aren't playing look like. Whether it's whether he is saying to them, look, don't worry about it. Like, don't worry, don't think that this is what I'm going to do in August or September. You've still got a big role to play off the bench, etc., etc. And but it's interesting if you're not in that team that finishes the season, you probably do feel a little bit of kind of frozen out of it all. But maybe that's a good lever. I tell you what, why don't we leave a space here for an ad read from Elliot? Because that's the bit of the pod that he really, really enjoys. So we'll do an ad read for you, and after that, we'll come back and maybe talk about some of the fine tuning ahead of next season and where we see this going after Sunday. So we're back, and as I said before the break, we thought we might just talk a little bit about where, like after Sunday, whatever happens, and hopefully it's the good thing. And we're doing this podcast from a gutter somewhere on the Blackstock Road on Monday morning. Um, because I think that this time last year, when we were looking at where does the team need to improve, I think we identified areas and things like that, and I think that's probably where we'll stick to, because I don't think any of us said we'll sign Kai Havertz and David Raya and that will make us a lot better. So I think it's a bit of a fool's errand to predict like players or even profiles. But
Yep.
Clive, in terms of, as we potentially consider a season where we get 89 points, we take 4 points off Manchester City, 4 points off Liverpool, and it's still not enough. And look, I have no appetite for some of the stuff I've seen on social media about what about this game, what about if we don't concede that corner at Fulham and blah blah blah.
Yep.
Because for me, the season's made of a million moments, and you could just as easily look at moments that did go our way that might mean we have 83 points or
Yep.
81 points or 77 points or whatever. So I really don't think it's even a worthwhile thought experiment to do some of that stuff. But thematically, what do you think Arteta and his staff will be looking at a bit now, but maybe after their hangovers have subsided on Tuesday or Wednesday and the coaching staff get together and they start plotting next season? What do you think are some of the top things on that kind of agenda?
Well, Tim, I've been thinking about this. You'll be glad to recognise. I think this time last year, I had a good feeling that we need to improve off the ball. Right? So, and it was brought into my mind from the Brentford game. You've heard me say it 100 times. The Brentford game thereafter, how people went long on us, City went long on us. We weren't able to close the gaps, and I didn't. I just thought we had to improve off the ball in the areas where I saw the gaps, which were in the centre of the park. Xhaka was ill around the period for a while. Partey was injured for a period. Rob Holding was playing, and we misshaped our midfield to try to cover him, and we created gaps elsewhere. And so it's quite easy for me to sort of say, and we need to improve off the ball and get better in that way and control momentums of the game a bit better. Don't let momentums control us. I didn't predict that. I thought Declan Rice might come, if I'm honest with you, but I didn't predict Kai Havertz, and I didn't know he was good off the ball. I didn't know he could change our whole of our mindset to be positive off the ball, and so that was really really good serious change. This season I've got a couple other little themes in my mind. I think one is our ability to offensively run through teams. I think at the moment, the one player that runs through lines is Bukayo Saka. He gets it and he runs through people. He runs through lines with or without the ball. He attacks and he runs through. A lot of our other players are to feet players, and they combine or late arrivers in Havertz, for example. And I think Havertz will develop that running through ability. I think he's doing it, but Jesus doesn't run through. Martinez had a bit of a dip in form. Trossard's a bit more of an off-the-ball player. So it's that running through combination, penetration. I want to see a little bit more of that. And the second thing that's in my mind is efficiency. And this comes in maybe a bit more rounded. Efficiency from can we win more efficiently? Can we win with a little bit less emotion? Just a little bit less. And that's not saying we're overly emotional, but just have a little bit of a change in mindset to say, we're winning this today, home versus Spurs. We're winning this against West Ham at home. And we're going to do it this way. And just do it. And don't take too much out of the emotional well. This is not a critique of over-celebration in previous season, because what I realised massively when the schedule come out, when we hit the last 16 of the Champions League, I realised then, once that schedule dropped, it's a new season. This is something else. This is every 3 days, and you have to have a tank full. Another part of the efficiency angles, I heard this today actually, that we've got 7 or 8 squad members that have had 1,000 minutes or less. Now that is probably a byproduct of where we are in our squad evolution. And we have a certain group of players, a core group of players that have lifted us to the record number of wins in our 130-year history. So this is a
and
good
they haven't
sign.
been injured. Like the core haven't been injured. Like I do kind of agree with. I don't agree with it in the way that detractors say it. Like, oh, Arsenal have had good injury luck, but we have, I think, broadly had decent injury luck.
Injury luck or injury lessons learned, because there have been times, Tim, particularly, let's pick 2 players, Tomiyasu and Thomas Partey. They've been brought back too soon from injury multiple times and broke down. We haven't had to do that so much this year. So Tomiyasu, Jesus too, well said. He was brought back and he wasn't ready to come back last season. He wasn't ready. We could see it with our eyes, couldn't we? Excuse me. And so now we're bringing back people. When they come back, they stay back. That's a medical lessons learned. So, clap to the club, right? But I remember Thomas Partey running back at White Hart Lane, the Spurs ground, while they were scoring the second goal, and he broke down and being pushed back onto the pitch. No one can tell me that he was ready to play that game, or there wasn't a significant risk. So we're learning from that. So squad efficiency. So if you've got 7 or 8 players in your squad that are under 1,000 minutes, that means you've got some work to do regarding selling and regarding making sure you have a greater balance, right? So I think and I'm not saying that costs us anything. That's just smart. You do that because you should. That's just smart from a financial point of view, that you're not paying people to not play. You got maybe our squad could be a little bit smaller, but with more people playing. So if you get your squad efficiency right and you get your spend right appropriately, and if we get the sales that we need, then suddenly we can have maybe a smaller squad, but they are more comparable in quality. Because let's be honest, there are a couple of players in that team that we don't want to see. We don't want to see anywhere else but on that pitch. You know what I mean? And if they're not playing, we're a little bit worried. John Stones on the bench, Man City this week. I don't think I heard a single word about it. You know, he didn't play. No problem. Akanji played. Diaz played. Walker played. Guardiola played. John Stones, who's going to be holding England's defence together, didn't play. And wow, I didn't see a single drama. So we have to get to the point where we decide not to play Bukayo Saka that none of us are crying in our beer before the game. Because I remember the last time we didn't play, maybe Man City at home, but time before that, maybe Leeds at home. And
Yep.
I remember being worried, Tim. I remember being worried. So I think those are the two things I'm looking at, really, and so far. But I'm sure I have more in my head for Saturday night, that's for sure.
Yeah, I think leaner is the word I'd use for the
That's a
squad.
good
Like
word.
City, yes, because City, like they don't have like 30 players, but what they have is they have
Yeah,
like 20, 21 who are all first 11 quality.
yeah,
And one of the reasons I think you refer to lessons learned around injuries, I mean, a big factor in that probably isn't just medical, it's just having a better squad.
yeah,
So we recognise that Tomiyasu is always injured. So we've got players now who can play the positions he plays and minimise that. Same with Partey, like not
yeah,
just Rice, but Jorginho. Like we bought
yeah,
Jorginho because of Partey's injury history. That's
yeah.
exactly why we did it. Like
We de-risked him, didn't we?
ordinarily you wouldn't have, like, because we were just discussing it, right? They're basically cheeks of the same arse. Player wise, they're the same age, they do very similar things. Ordinarily, there'd be redundancy there, but we brought Jorginho because Partey's injury history means there isn't redundancy there. So it's a lot of it is just about having like a better squad, and some of these players that, I mean, they will go in the summer, so obviously we'll have to do, and it'll be fascinating to see how we do that, because I don't think we'll be buying squad players or buying players to be squad players. I don't think we're going to sell like Reece Nelson and then look at someone else who might play like 400 minutes. I think it's going to be, this is a guy who can come in and compete a bit like, more like Trossard.
Yeah,
When we brought him in, that was, and I loved something Aaron Ramsdale said just after we signed Trossard, and he said, "This guy has not come to be a squad player." In his head, like he said, I see people talking about him as a squad player, but when I see him in training, he does not think of himself as a squad player. He's come to
yeah.
take a shirt, and here we are, just over a year later, and he's taken a shirt. And I think it's, just more of those type of players, maybe fewer of the type of players who really only play if we're 6-0 up with 10 minutes to go, or
Yeah.
like the tea lady's injured and we've really got no other choice. I
Or
think
we're
that's
playing
definitely
Luton
right.
or Sheffield United or something like that, and we see a couple of players start and we get excited, but really they're shop window games, Tim. And these
Yeah.
players have been in the shop window, and so we are positioned to sell. And there are
Yep.
teams. What's the phrase? One man's trash is another man's treasure, or something like that. That's
Yep.
the phrase. And so there are teams that want to have Premier League ready players that need to stay in the league for financial reasons, etc. There are teams there that will take our players that potentially are in an 89-point squad. There may not be so many taking them in a team that finished eighth and had 5 wins in a row to finish eighth. You see what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so, and that's where we used to be 3 years ago. So,
And that is potentially another learning that has potentially contributed to a better injury record. Look at, reel off the games Emile Smith Rowe has started this season. It's Sheffield United at home, Luton at home, Nottingham Forest away, I think.
I think so, yeah.
Like there's a theme coming through there, isn't there?
Yeah,
Like when we played Sheffield United at home. Like the two games I'd compare, because they happened at very similar times of the year. Last season, we played Nottingham Forest at the end of October at home, October 30th. It was our ninth game in October because the fixture list got all squished up ahead of the World Cup. And Gabriel Jesus started it. And we
mm,
were at home to Nottingham Forest. And he played brilliantly and we won 5-0. But he says he went to the World Cup with a knee injury. That was
yeah,
2 weeks before. So he must have, I don't think he was talking about a week before. He
yeah,
must have had that sore knee. And for the ninth game in our month, at home to Nottingham Forest, Eddie Nketiah was on the bench and Jesus started. This season, we played Sheffield United at home. Eddie Nketiah starts and he scores a hat trick.
Yeah,
Like, you know, and
makes a difference. Makes a difference.
it does, and it doesn't mean that Arteta thinks Eddie Nketiah is his guy. Or I mean, it helps us to sell him if that's what we want to do. But also, it was just this team are like we can win this game with Eddie Nketiah up front. It's no drama,
Yeah,
and there aren't that many games like that in the Premier League. But I even see it in the Luton game at the beginning of April, where we went big on the changes because, and I think that kind of maybe goes against Arteta's instincts a little bit, but it was a pragmatic decision because it was like, look, we've got a lot of games coming up. We've got Champions League and all of that. This is the last chance for us to do that. And we did it. And I do think that's a learning as well. But
I do see you
maybe,
mentioned Champions League there, Tim, and I think that's the other thing. When we were doing our preview pods at the start of the year, and we were discussing what we expected to see, and we talk about the season, and we're looking at our team and saying the attack's not clicking compared to last year, and the atmosphere is not quite the same. And you know, I was going through my first date, first date comparisons, etc. None of us were really thinking about Champions League apart from the fact we were going to play in it. You know, and I underestimated the emotional impact it would have on the team, particularly that first game. You know, and particularly the Bayern games and the Porto games. They were physically and emotionally draining. And I'd forgotten, mate. I got no problem qualms in saying that. I'd forgotten what that felt like, or did it feel like that before? I remember the Bayern games we used to get thumped in. Obviously, you went over there a couple of times, so you know what I'm talking about. I don't remember the same emotional drain because I didn't think we were good enough at that time, you know. So I didn't feel it like I felt it this time, and so that's something that we have to get ready for. I think this year, either cope with the emotional drain of it, see it as a little bit more of this is what we are now, this is what we do. So our mental approach to it is different because we've done it before. We've done the serious travel, the serious event of it all, and then just cope with it better, just by experience. And then we'll have a bit more energy for Aston Villa stuck in between two Bayern games. It won't be daunting because that to me was the week we found our level maybe.
yeah, I guess if you were going to if you were going to relitigate the season, maybe a couple of penalty shootouts. Like, I mean, look, we'd never know the psychological drain of this, but maybe if we lose that Porto penalty shootout,
Yeah,
and maybe if
I know.
Manchester City win their Real Madrid penalty shootout,
Yeah,
I'm more inclined to look at the latter. I did feel like City had to stay in Europe. I was very disappointed that they lost the shootout against Madrid. I think would have been in with a bit more of a chance
I think
if they'd have had.
we needed the Porto win as well, Tim, didn't we? We needed
Yeah,
that.
yeah, yeah.
We needed
Yes,
that.
yeah.
We needed that. We needed to get par, which is the last eight. We just couldn't be knocked out last 16 again. And no matter how we did it, I think that was a great moment, an important moment.
Yeah, and while we talk about things that Arsenal might look to fix a little bit next season, the thing that really jumps out for me is there are 5 Premier League games this season where Arsenal haven't scored, and that's a high amount. Teams that win the league don't usually do that. And we didn't score away at Bayern as well, and we kind of didn't really look like scoring either. And I think there's probably still this question about, you talked about another player that runs through people, like another game breaker. And you spoke about emotional energy and things like that. I feel like Arsenal have to play really well to win, and I think they do that like 99% of the time. But I just wonder if, well, I definitely think we definitely need another like good attacker, like whether
Yeah,
it's Nketiah upgrade or Nelson upgrade. One of those things has to
or
happen.
both, Tim, or
Just
both.
yeah, and just like another player, like when you win like we haven't. I feel like I don't. This is unscientific. I feel like when you win the league, you have a lot of 1-0s, right? You have a lot of, or sorry, you have like a clutch of like Liverpool 1-0, Salah. Like Liverpool go to Brighton, they're not great. They're a bit 7 out of 10. Salah scores, they win 1-0, they go home. City, go to like I don't know, Palace, and they're not great, but Haaland scores and they win 1-0 and that's it. Like, I don't feel like we have a lot of 1-0 and get on the bus wins.
Yeah,
I feel like we basically, like, we nearly always play really, really well. And the few times where we don't, we usually don't get the result, and we have to go in the lead as well quite a lot. And I think definitely, because it's a real weird paradox to be the highest scorers in the league, but to have 5 games where you don't score. And
yeah.
that shows you that when we do go in front, we have got that, okay, you've got to come at us now. Now we can get you. And we were able to boost our goal differences by slapping people 5 and 6-0. But I feel like, that Villa game away from home, the Newcastle game away from home, where we're a bit 6 out of 10 and we lose those 1-0. And I just feel like we need another player who can make those a 1-1 or a 1-0 win that's completely unremarkable and you forget about. Is that clearly that's going to be big on the agenda, right?
I think it's massive on the agenda, and I think for our psychological profile of our team, because we have to develop an aura. I've been talking about this for a while now, Tim. And how do you develop that aura? So we got a defensive aura. We have that. And we have a collective offensive game. But we haven't got an attacking aura, if that makes sense. I know it sounds crazy, but we don't people just they don't look at us and say, oh, they're a fantastic attack. But we just score goals, right? Because we're so well coached and clearly we're smart and intelligent. And so, first time I ever saw this was Man United's 99 team, I'm afraid. When you beat York and Cole, they brought on Solskjaer and Sheringham. You had to beat them twice. And having that ability off the bench to change the game. So you think about the Bayern games, the Villa games, Newcastle games. I'm sorry, we need to have 50, 60 million pound forwards on the bench. That when they come on, they are of the same quality of the group that we at that time is it our first group. We have to have it.
How many times do you remember Carnu, Wiltord, Henry, and
Yeah,
Bergkamp being on the pitch at the same time when it was 1-1 at Highbury, and you
yeah,
look at it and you watch the opposition go, for fuck's
yeah.
sake,
We,
really?
we need to have it. We need to have it. I got some. I'm on the YouTubes big time. You can tell from my Twitter timeline at the moment. I'm there, and I sort of know what I want to see, and I want to see serious forward power up. When we make a change, it's like, yeah, this isn't like we're making a change, and no disrespect to we're making a change to a young player that's maybe not proven, not had too many minutes, and we're hoping he's going to do something. Now we're making a change with a serious player that's got serious physical attributes, game breaking speed or power or height, to say, no, we're adding this to the cocktail. We're taking the defender out. And so you're not getting away with it, Newcastle. You're not getting away with Villa for 86 minutes. You're going to hold on. It's not going to happen. We're going to take a defender out and put this guy on, and he's going to pin your two centre backs in place, and we're going to take you down the half spaces. We need to have that, Tim. That's the next step for us, so we can control those moments, and not just control the Villas and the Newcastles, but control the teams when we go abroad. Make sure that we can take out our first choice at that particular time. They can sit, and they can sit calmly, knowing that we've got enough quality to rotate in those areas. So I think having the ability to offensively rotate with the same level of quality or a different set of power and profile, that's key for me. There's been discussions around this Maverick player. I'm not in that discussion. I'm not there on that. But I'm there on, now we're going to bring on somebody else, and you're going to have to adjust to that guy as well. That's where I am at the moment.
Yeah, and I think when you look at it as well, and again, like, we're talking about mega high level, right? So when we're talking about going to another level, we're talking real margins. But like Anfield, Etihad, Allianz, 1 goal scored. That was Gabriel Anfield header from a free kick. Like, we didn't score an open play at any 3 of those grounds. Now, like you said, off the ball, we're so good
Yeah,
that we drew 2 of those games, and the other one we lost 1-0 to really the only big chance we. But, like that level of threat, not just where you can stamp on the small teams when you need to, but perhaps the big teams as
yeah,
well. that mean that when you're at the Etihad and it's 0-0 with 10 minutes to go, your first thought isn't how do we keep this 0-0. Your first thought's how do we go and win it 1-0 type thing. And again, to draw a comparison to the last time we were winning leagues and all of that, we won the league at Old Trafford 2002. Bergkamp and Henry were both injured for that game, and we played Kanu and Wiltord up front, and Wiltord scores the winner, etc., etc. And so having that level of firepower, it wins. It can be the difference in the biggest games as well. And we haven't quite had that, or maybe that Villa game where, against Villa, as soon as they go 1-0 up, I don't know how you felt. I was like, game over. Game
If
over.
we
Like,
picked
that's it.
all of our attackers, didn't we, from the start? And so once we didn't score first, then we faded as the game went on, and we weren't able to power up. And you use that word there, threat. And that is it. We need more threat. And if Bukayo Saka has a bad day, it can't be over for us, because he's the
Yeah.
one he's the first guy over the hill. He's the most threatening player that we have. And so we need to have one or two more that offer a threat like him, or in a slightly different way. And as soon as we do, people are going to look at our team and look at our bench, and maybe they'll do what teams do against Man City and say, we got no chance today. We got no chance. Because if we hold them out for 60, we're done. We're done when they bring that lot on. And that's the next phase. I don't critique the club for this, Tim, because I just think it's the natural next phase for us.
Yeah. You
It's
can't build your whole squad in one go. Like,
no, exactly. Well, you can if you're Man City at a different time.
Well,
But but if you want to do this legally, we've got to do this right. And this is the next phase for us. And I'm excited for it, mate. I really am.
yeah.
It's the fact that no one's arguing about people listening right now, they're probably not arguing with us at all. They think, yeah, they're
No.
right. That means this is good, right? That means this is happening in the right way. So I'm excited.
Yeah, and look, past success is not always a predictor of future success, but they've got all the steps right so far. Even the ones that we doubted and craned our necks about, like Raya and Havertz, they've worked.
Yeah.
And maybe they took a bit of time to work, and maybe that's another learning for next season. How do we not make that take time? For example, is there a way that when we bring our new players in, particularly coming off a tournament summer, is there a way where we can get them, or is it just completely natural? Is it unavoidable? Or do we have the kind of squad now where we can sit a player on the bench for a couple of months? And I know like Klopp's done that a lot at Liverpool, Guardiola's done it a lot at City, where it's like, okay, we'll bring you in now, but you'll sit and watch for the first 3 months and we'll introduce you slowly. Whereas like Raya and Havertz were starting straight away. Maybe we'll have the type of squad that the players we bring in the summer, we can say, train with us, watch us, come in 20 minutes, 30 minutes to go. And then in November, December, we can throw you in a little bit more. Let's finish with a discussion about everyone's favourite topic, which is completely under-discussed in football circles, which is VAR. Now, I don't intend to have a discussion so much about the merits of VAR, etc., because that's really been done to death. But Wolves have tabled a motion and a vote for the Premier League clubs in June to potentially scrap VAR. Now, before I throw that over to you and ask you the question about I don't think it's going to happen in a million years because they need 14 votes. I don't see them getting that. When it was voted in 2018, it was 19 it was unanimous. All 20 clubs voted for it. I don't think the genie will go back in the bottle. Before I throw it over to you, Clive, I'll make like a couple of points because I think everyone knows by now that I don't like VAR, etc., etc. But I guess just to, and also I think the thing is, I think it's a philosophical thing, and I don't think you can change people's positions on it because it just comes down to what you enjoy in the sport. And I don't think there's a right answer to this. It just comes down to, do you prize justice or do you prize the flow of the game? And I don't think you can or should even try to change people's positions on that. It's like trying to tell people that they should not listen to a type of music they enjoy and listen to another type of music. Like it just doesn't happen like that. The other thing I'll say as well is I've just got no patience for the argument I see so much, and it really winds me up about like, oh, there's nothing wrong with VAR. It's the idiots that are operating it, and it's just like that's such a logical fallacy on so many respects, because it's like VAR is not Skynet. It's just another set of people, and so yes, it will be like human fallibility and all of that will come into it, and you will not, and a lot of the rules are subjective and you might not agree with calls and etc., but like that, to me, that's just, if you're going to say that, that's just an argument to get rid of it, because there is not an underground army of super skilled competent people who are going to come up and take over. Like, if your position is, oh, they're all idiots, then get rid of it, because that, like, there isn't like, there's no way around it. And I kind of think we're guilty of not looking at this from the perspective of the people that are being asked to operate it. And I promise you, whatever industry you work in, listener, if someone drops a bomb on your job and fundamentally changes the way you have to do your job, you are not going to you're not going to get it right overnight. And I think there has to be, whatever your position on VAR, and I say this as someone that's very anti, there has to be some tolerance that it might take 10 years, right? And I always make this comparison, Clive, with the back pass law for goalkeepers. Like, I remember the back pass law coming in, and it was hilarious for a couple of years, particularly when it very first came in. I remember like goalkeepers falling over, they didn't know what to do. Like it dropped a bomb on their job overnight, because for 25, 30 years they'd been playing in goal and been able to pick up a back pass, and all of a sudden it changed overnight. And what happened? We got a gradual evolution where they got used to it, and then a new generation comes through that comes up without the back pass law. Now we've got goalkeepers that are basically centre mids. Like,
Yeah.
we bought our current goalkeeper largely because he's a good footballer. Like, it's changed that much. And I see VAR similarly. I think these guys who are doing it now, a lot of them are in their like 40s and 50s, and they've done their whole careers without it. Bomb's been dropped on their job, and you probably are going to have to wait until you get that generation who've grown up with it. So, like, I think those are just things I wanted to put at the kind of beginning of the discussion. But first of all, do you think there's any chance of it getting voted out? And if it was up to you, would you get rid of it?
No, I don't think there's no chance of getting it voted out because technology is in all our lives is not going away, and so people will say very very quickly, why wouldn't you use it? The TV cameras would then show the TV companies would show us an instance where if I was in place, this game would have had a different result. They would all want to go back to it. So I don't think it's going to change, but I do think the vote is a good thing because it's a slap round the game's chops to say we need to get better. Arteta tried his big rant, and that was really a call to say we're the best league in the world. We need to be better than this. Right? That's literally what it was. I'm embarrassed to be part of this. And that's what he was really saying. If you listen to it carefully, that's what he really said. And he wanted the game to have a look at itself. Of course, everyone went tribal on him and spoke about his language and the way he did it, and didn't really look at the larger message. You said something there about the gradual evolution of the game, the gradual evolution of the back pass, etc. That's what we haven't done with VAR. We haven't introduced it gradually. You know, if we'd have introduced it in a different way to allow us to understand our weaknesses, because what we've done, we've brought in VAR, we've got a set of new technology, and we've given it to referees at the end of their careers, and say, there you go, you've got an extended career, come and do VAR, or you've got people who do VAR on top of their already busy schedules, right? So I don't think we have enough people of the right people to do the job, and so I also feel we've just tried to re-referee the game in one big lump. Instances, cards, goal. For me, it should have been brought in with lines. Bring it in for lines. So if there's a foul, referee says there's a foul. Is it inside or outside the area? When someone's doing a cross like the Joe Willett cross, did it go out or did it not go out? Make sure you got your lines sorted out. Goalkeeper, make sure you got your lines sorted out. And then you maybe review the goals. I've given a goal. Can you just check that's a goal? Simple as that. Just that simple line there it's a goal. Can you just check I got everything right? Maybe they might have checked Kevin De Bruyne's cross in the week. I'm just saying that there's the rumours that might have been offside, but there's no process. So when you have a set of football people, referees, there isn't a consistent process. And when there isn't a consistent process, then you start to look at the people. The way you protect the human error is to make it very process centric. There are people listening to this that have process driven jobs. You do this on this scenario, do this on that scenario, do this on that scenario, and they get paid for it because you know how to react in certain processes. Right?
Triages and all of that
Yeah,
kind of stuff.
mate, I've worked in programs and projects. I've sat there with consultants from different consultancy firms from the big four, and they've racked up processes for us. They've got kids that do it straight out of university, easy for them. Where is the process behind VAR? Just get to where is the processes that are consistent that we can work towards? Because if there is, things will get checked. Let's start with that, should we? Let's start with that. And there are some things which are not really interpretation. They are just obvious. They're process failures. That's the stuff that you need to sort of get through. The Anthony Gordon one this week, I could see there was a foul on that, and they missed it. They didn't mean to miss it, but they need if it leads to a or doesn't lead to a high quality shot or whatever, like a penalty, which is nearly a goal these days. We have to say to ourselves if that's going to be in it or not. If referee says if he's going to be in it, then great, let's do it properly. If he's not going to be in it, let's take it out from the scenario. Because at the moment we're just all unsure what we're seeing in any sport. If you're unsure of the product, you will question it. You will question how much you want to invest in it. So that's why I am with it, Tim. When we first had a discussion about VAR, my response was, I'm worried we're going to lose the soul of the game. And by that I meant, I chose those words carefully. By that I meant we all go to see goals. We all go to see that moment of joy. And that moment of joy it's been watered down, isn't it? How many times do you stand there, whether we're at home or in the stadium, and you're looking around for the indicator to say, oh my God, are they going to allow it? And then, so the soul of the game has changed. And that's a real shame, really. That's not what I'm used to seeing. And so, yeah, I don't think it's going to go back, I'm afraid. If he does,
Yeah.
I'm not sure. I don't think it's going to go back. We're going to sit back and maybe look at this era and wonder, was the necessary pain that we had to go through? I think it is, I'm afraid.
Yeah. I think, look, if I was thinking entirely selfishly, I'd get rid of it because I don't like it, and I never thought I would like it, and etc. etc. However, realistically, I don't think you can put the genie back in the bottle, and no one should be under the illusion that, like, I hate all the noise around it and stuff like that, but that's not going away, because if we get rid of it, we'll just have a different flavor of the same argument, and so like that's never going away. That's never going away. So I'm not naive enough to think, yeah, I'd enjoy things more if the AR wasn't there. But all of the very tiresome, weary arguments, they probably get worse. Actually, I do think that once you do something like this, you kind of do just have to stick with it, and you do just have to go through the pain, and I do think it will get better. I do. I think that's quite natural. I just think it will be slower than people want. I think the other interesting angle on this, you mentioned what Mikel Arteta said after the Newcastle game in November. It's interesting. It's Wolves that have tabled this. I think Wolves are widely acknowledged to have been the team that have suffered the worst in terms of decisions. And actually, this is quite a smart way of them avoiding like a misconduct charge or something. This is a very like legal way of saying we're fed up with this. And they've put out like their reasons, which I agree with all of them. They make all of these points about like a loss of trust, a loss of spontaneity, and all of that. I don't think they honestly really think that. I think that's like a bit of PR really for them, and I think I'm sure they know which way the vote's going to go, and I do think that this is a way for them to say we've been screwed without saying the words "we've been screwed," so that Gary O'Neill loses another 50 grand out of his back pocket, and Wolves get. And also, it also takes the focus off individuals. So,
Yeah.
like, Gary O'Neill doesn't have to sit there and say this referee screwed us. They can focus on the process and perhaps depersonalize it. I essentially think they're being quite clever, because I'm sure they know better than we do. They're in these meetings and these discussions all the time. I'm pretty sure they know this isn't going to get the vote. That this is kind of a way of them, the anti Nottingham Forest, as it were, like Nottingham
Yeah.
Forest doing all of this awful stuff with awful optics. I think Wolves have been a bit cleverer about it, but yeah.
There is
So
a there is a
I
league.
don't.
Sorry, mate. There is
Yeah,
a league table out there which says who has been hurt the most, and Wolves are top of it. I think
yeah,
I saw the number -17. I don't know what that meant. If they lost 17 points due to VAR, and but Arsenal was second with under 7 points. So again, listener, don't kill me if I got that wrong. I just read it briefly. I don't know. I don't know its source, but if it wouldn't take much for us to all work out that Wolves are the one that have been hurt the most this season from almost the first game.
yeah.
Right? So
I did see someone say that all the London teams are in the bottom half of that, and given the geographical makeup of the referees and all of that, but I've not really got the energy or bandwidth for that.
yeah,
But
we
yeah,
want to
I
sleep.
think it's interesting that a team's done that. I think we all know how it's going to go, and actually the votes on spending regulations, that's more interesting to me, and I think we can and will do a podcast on that, because I think there's a
Yeah,
lot of things
very
people
important.
haven't understood, and I think the messaging around it hasn't been fantastic either, so that people have really misunderstood like what it's all about and how it works. So we'll do that at some point in the aftermath of the season. But for now, we will speak to you. Sorry, let me say first of all, thank you very much, Clive.
Oh, thank you very much, Tim.
And no, it's suddenly just hit me that this is the last podcast of the season, and I was going to do the line of "We will speak to you after Arsenal 10, Everton 0, and Manchester City 1, West Ham United 1, Antonio 90 plus 6, and we will speak to you from the gutter of the Blackstock Road or Upper Street on Monday with a full pod going over the events of Sunday, maybe a little bit about Saturday night and the live event and all of that. But hopefully, listener, the next time we speak to you, we will be champions of England. Wouldn't that be nice? And isn't that a nice note to end on? So yeah, we'll be back with another podcast, come what may, on Monday. Until then, we'll speak to you again soon.